This started with one football player putting pressure on every other athlete, not only in the NFL, but also the NBA, Major League Baseball. This whole movement was started 4 years ago. I think people lose that context when Colin Kaepernick did what he did. That was the beginning of the movement that you see now, the continuation of that. So to say that there's an immense amount of pressure on football players, I get it. I understand from a player standpoint that you want to continue the movement and make sure you take a stance that is strong, like the NBA was able to do when they did it in the bubble and the Milwaukee Bucks walked off the court. But I also want to remind people that the NFL players have been at this a little bit longer as far as demonstrations and as far as protests than any other league when it comes to police brutality, police reform, and trying to get these things addressed. And I'm not talking about having a competition between what league does more or what league does less. These players have to determine what type of approach they take, whether that's sitting out games, whether that's deciding to protest on sidelines, putting messages on jerseys. I applaud the NBA for everything they've done from years ago when they talked at the ESPYs to now and walking off the court, taking one of the biggest stands. But I don't want people to forget that this was started by Colin Kaepernick, because it seems like we continue to have all of these conversations about the things that are transpiring in the sports arena right now. And the one that actually put it all on the line gets lost in that conversation, who was Colin Kaepernick.
Marcus, what approach should they take in order to maximize their efforts?
Charlie.
Okay, go ahead, Stephen A.
Go ahead. No. I just want to sit up there and say I don't disagree with anything that Marcus said. I just think it's important because we got a lot of people out there, and I got somebody very prominent who I trust immensely just pointing out to me that there's so many people out there that's using the word pause when it comes to what the NBA players just did. He wanted me to point out it's not a pause. It was a boycott. It was a boycott because folks are sick and tired, and they wanted to bring attention to the level of oppression that has been exacted against folks in disenfranchised communities throughout this nation. And they feel that just because they're rich and they're famous doesn't mean they have not been marginalized. It doesn't mean they haven't been demonized. It doesn't mean that they have that they don't have to deal with the political apparatus that swarms them on far too many occasions and pressures them to just play ball and be quiet. And they're sick of it. So again, it was a boycott. It was not a pause. And obviously it's important to mention that because when we think about NFL players, if there is one entity that we believe in our heart of heart, watching all sports, guys, watching golf, hockey, tennis, basketball, football, baseball, etc. If there is one sport that we are all inclined to believe will definitely try to suppress the momentum of this moment that folks have been speaking about and screaming about and going off about, and yes, boycotting about, it is the National Football League. We know what their MO is. And so as a result of that, it's incredibly imperative that we mention the fact that when we talk about NFL players, they don't have the guaranteed monies that the NBA players have and what have you, the guaranteed contracts. So yes, they may not boycott, but they have to be heard. And we have to assist those players in making sure that their voices are not suppressed by owners. I'm not worried about Commissioner Roger Goodell because I think he has tried. I think he has 32 owners to answer to, and I actually think that he's paid to take the hits, and it's unfair to look at him. Look at the 32 owners in the National Football League. Know them by name. On this show in the near future, I'm going to put up the faces of every single owner in the National Football League. I want people to know who they are. That way, when the players, in any way, if we receive indications that their voices are being suppressed, we can sit up there and point out who the hell is doing the suppressing. That's how you fight stuff like that off. And I think that's the way to do it. I hope I said that correctly, Marcus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to be quick because I know Max wants to get back in. Stephen A., that's the point. Like I saw the Ravens put out a point plan. They can't do that without Steve Bisciotti, and Bisciotti actually made a video. So that's one owner I know of that I've seen, and there could be some others, but that's one guy that I've seen out forefront to actually make a statement about what's going on. And it seems, the Baltimore Ravens organization are supportive of their players. They literally put out a plan of action about what they are going to try to do with their local, state, and federal government. And to that point, like, I get it. I understand. And first, let me go back. Stephen A., I think what you said and your source is poignant. That was a boycott, not a pause, because it got everybody across the world talking about what had transpired. So I think it's important to understand the magnitude of that moment. The second part of that is, to Stephen A.'s point as well, there are so many more football players. There is not one alliance. There is so many different demographics, belief systems, the way they want to go about doing things. It's not as simple as assembling in the NFL as it is in the NBA. I'm not saying that takes the pressure off of what players should do or want to do. I'm just saying that that is much more of a difficult task than what we saw the Milwaukee Bucks do. Now, with that, when it comes to the football season, when it comes to either boycotting, showing solidarity, making political statements, protesting, putting things on your jersey, I expect to see all of that from NFL players. But I want to go back to what I said. I would be a fool to not mention, because I talked to these guys. They've talked to me. They've reached out. Marcus, we've already been doing things. We've already voiced. We've already kneeled. We protested. Colin Kaepernick doesn't have a job because of it. So all of that stuff that we're talking about outside of the Milwaukee Bucks walking off the court, the NFL players have gotten together. A large majority of those guys that are African American have gotten together and said, we have to do something about this, and they continue to do so. So I don't want to get lost in some sort of new pressure on NFL players when they've already kind of been on the front lines doing things and already making noise and trying to enact change.